this is the last weekend to, not really the last weekend to impress the committee. They should have been paying attention from the beginning, but the committee starts spitting out the fake rankings starting on Tuesday. And again, as a public service announcement, and I will do this extensively on Tuesday, don't pay any attention to it. Don't try to glean any information from it because they don't matter until the last one comes out. But if you had to take a stab at it right now, give me your 4 in order. Actually, give me your 6 in order because they always give us 5 and 6.
Right now, I believe that the College Football Playoff Selection Committee, and this is like not with this weekend taken into consideration.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're probably going to put Tennessee number 1.
Okay.
I think that right now, the College Football Playoff Selection Committee would probably put Georgia number 2, Ohio State at 3, and Alabama at 4, Michigan at 5, Clemson at 6.
So Tennessee, Georgia, Ohio State, Alabama, Michigan, Clemson.
Yes, that would be my guess as what they would do.
All right. What would you do? That was fascinating, and it leads me to 1,000 other questions. But what would you do?
Wait for the end of the season?
Yes, but I agree with you. I agree.
So,
we shouldn't do this. And then because it was so popular in terms of a television attraction, we started doing it for basketball too.
So do you want to hear what so I do fill out a weekly ballot for the CBS Sports 131.
Sure.
And like in that ballot, I think that I have Ohio State number 1.
Right.
Yeah. And look, they do not have the resume wins that some of those other teams up in the top 5 have. But in my own personal belief of how these teams stack up against each other, I think Ohio State is number 1, and I look forward for them to be able to prove it, starting with not just whether they win or lose, but how they look in a difficult road environment at Happy Valley going up against Penn State this weekend. The Michigan game at the end of the season. Like all of these are going to be important data points to see whether or not I still think that's the case. I have Tennessee number 2 on my own personal ballot. I've got Georgia number 3 on my own personal ballot. I've got Clemson at 5, and I've got Michigan at 4.
Clemson at 5, Michigan at 4. All right, and you have Alabama. You have Alabama 6.
Correct.
Right? All right. I actually have not done it, but Tennessee has the best win, right?
Yeah, that's what I think. Tennessee's got the best win, and also they're all going to be able to point to the LSU victory as being very significant because I think that LSU could find itself up inside the committee's top 25. Florida, LSU, and Alabama just looks good. And if they add a Kentucky win on top of that this weekend, that's just a kind of, in comparing these undefeated teams, to be able to just say that out loud, we've got an undefeated team with wins against Florida, LSU, Alabama, and Kentucky.
Yeah.
That is better than anything that the other undefeated teams can say.
Who has the second best win? Is it Georgia with the 49-3 win over Oregon in the opener?
Possibly. I mean, certainly with the way that Oregon has just continued to roll ever since then and how impressive that group has been in improving. I mean, shocker, first-year head coach, transfer quarterback, might not be all in sync in the first game of the season.
Against a team like Georgia, especially.
Against a team like Georgia in Atlanta. I think the Ducks are the Pac-12's best chance to make the college football playoff. There are plenty of but what about USC and the USC brand name arguments, which could be fair, but in terms of, what Oregon has done on paper since that season opener, I think if they finish as a 12-1 Pac-12 champion with the only loss being to Georgia, and Georgia is an SEC champion, then Oregon's going to have the best resume of anybody from the Big 12 or the Pac-12.
Chip Patterson is here, as he is every Wednesday. Tennessee's got the best win. Georgia, defending champs, and I don't think their schedule has been all that great. And I think that's we kind of lose sight over all of this is that. And I'm going to play a clip from Joel Klatt of Fox Sports that I want your take on in a second. But you and I have talked about this a lot over probably the last year, maybe longer, is that the sports become so top-heavy. I think you and I agree that the SEC is the deepest of the conferences, correct?
Correct.
Right. So there are more good teams, more teams that could beat even the best teams in that league than there are in any other league. Now it's different in the two divisions. I think there's more depth. I think, at least until recently anyway, in the West than there is in the East. But now you got Georgia and Tennessee. How good is Florida?
Not great.
Right.
And I also do think that I push back in that what I've come around on is that SEC is where the most talented players in college football are, but you still do have to go play the games.
Right.
And talented teams can stink. Teams loaded with 4 stars and 5 stars can go out there and not execute well. Mm-hmm. Texas A&M stinks. I mean, that's like, if you want to just say where are the most talented players in college football, what conference is the toughest on a week in, week out basis, it is true that for the most part, the SEC gives you no breaks. Mm-hmm. That, the 6th team in the SEC West is still loaded with 4 stars and 5 stars. And if they've all got it clicking, then you're going to be in trouble, or at least it's going to be difficult. And that's where I've started to say, like, I don't want to decide everything based on who would win on a neutral field, or what the Vegas odds think, or what your power rating is, because those power ratings are determined by the talent on the roster mostly. And we have seen that talent, especially when it's 18 to 22-year-olds, come out and stink. And so I would like to also take, your resume and, how you play, how you look, how you execute into consideration as well.
All right, let me let you listen to what you may have already heard this, but I'll play it again if people just tuning in because I played it before. Here's Joel Klatt from Fox, and this is about his lack of confidence, I'll use that phrase, in the Clemson Tigers as a legitimate playoff contender.
There's no other team in the country with an easier path to the playoff than Clemson, and it's been this way for quite some time. This is a team that has gotten the benefit of an 8-game conference schedule, not 9, and a ridiculously weak 1-team conference. Even Oklahoma had a tougher gauntlet through the Big 12 to go to the playoff in some of those years than what Clemson has had throughout their tenure, Dabo's tenure in these playoff years. And that's not to say like they didn't have good teams. No, of course they had great teams. They won national championships. So I'm not arguing that they shouldn't go. I'm just saying, like, boy, do we really think that they're any good? I don't think so. And we're not going to know until the playoff. And they're going to be there, by the way. So we're really playing for 3 spots.
All right. Thoughts on what Joel Klatt had to say? I think there's some truth there.
Oh, yeah.
But I think he's forgetting a couple of things, but we'll get to that in a second.
Yeah, I think he's right, he's wrong, he's right, he's wrong, and he's wrong. That's as I went through listening to what he was just saying. He is right that Clemson has the easiest path to the college football playoff from where we sit right now. All of Clemson's toughest games are in the rear view.
Right.
And they've won them. They still have a 0 in the loss column. They have 4 games remaining. And the toughest opponent that's left is South Carolina.
Yes.
And all the games outside of a trip to Notre Dame against a woeful Fighting Irish team are going to be in Death Valley. Like it is the easiest path for all the teams in the country. Between where we sit right now and the college football playoff, Clemson has the easiest path. You're 100% right about that, Joel Klatt. You're wrong that it's been that way for quite some time.
Thank you.
In 2016, a Heisman Trophy winner named Lamar Jackson came 4 yards away from knocking off the Tigers in Death Valley in a game that I was at and considered, one of the better regular season college football environments and college football games I've ever been a part of. The back and forth between Deshaun Watson, a Heisman Trophy finalist, and Lamar Jackson, a Heisman Trophy winner. That Louisville team did not lose another ACC game. They were technically co-Atlantic Division champions after Clemson lost against Pitt at home later in the season. But, who goes to the conference championship game is the Clemson Tigers. They go on to not only make the college football playoff, but win the national championship. I would also take it back to North Carolina pushing Clemson to an onside kick all the way back in 2015.
Yep.
I would look at the Notre Dame season of 2020 when they were a full conference member and beat Clemson in the regular season, though Clemson won the rematch in Charlotte handily. Listen, it has not always been that 2019 year where Clemson rolled everybody and then put 60 burger on the board against Virginia in the ACC championship game. There have been seasons where Clemson has been truly tested. So Joel Klatt, you are wrong about the fact that it has been that way for quite some time. I do think he's right that Oklahoma has had some more resistance.
Absolutely.
And I think that you are benefiting from a 9-game conference schedule versus an 8-game conference schedule.
Mm-hmm.
My mild pushback would be that in several of these years, we have seen Clemson play an SEC opponent sometimes on the other team's home stadium as part of a home and home. You know, Clemson in the Dabo Swinney era has done a home and home with Georgia. Clemson in the Dabo Swinney era has done a home and home with Texas A&M. Clemson has been in some of these big-time games, including against the eventual national champion Georgia Bulldogs just this last season. So, like, yes, Oklahoma has had some more difficult paths, and then I do think that he's wrong that we don't know if Clemson's any good, because I think that Clemson is very good.
I do too. I don't think
very good football team.
I don't think Clemson is national championship good, but that wasn't the question. The question is, are they playoff good? And they absolutely are. And here's the thing that I also push back on, because it's pretty transparent. This is Joel Klatt slamming the Atlantic Coast Conference when, and it's going to sound like a dirty little secret, but you alluded to it already, Chip, is that how many games this year, when we look back at Ohio State's schedule, are really losable games for them? So far,
Notre Dame, I just mentioned that Notre Dame is like woeful, and Notre Dame is going to end up being like the 4th toughest game that they had to play this season.
So in terms of how good the teams are that they have played, yeah, Notre Dame isn't. I think Penn State's good, but I've seen Penn State, and I don't know that Penn State's all that, but this will be the toughest game I think that Ohio State has played so far this year, this Saturday. Then the Michigan game, and I think we're done.
Yeah, Northwestern, Indiana, Maryland. That's what's left.
Maybe the Maryland game is at Maryland. Maybe that'll be somewhat of a challenge, but I don't think so. So what are we talking about, Joel? So if you're going to take that shot at Clemson, who, by the way, plays in the more difficult half of the ACC, if we're going to – they don't play a coastal schedule. Well, it's not like they play Virginia Tech and Virginia all year. So they're playing the more difficult side. Florida State's not easy. I don't think Florida State's great, but that's not an easy game. So I just think that it's just very convenient to take a shot at the ACC because, frankly, the ACC has kind of earned that reputation. But I just think Joel, that was just low-hanging fruit for Joel talking to the college football masses, whereas we got a team that you say is the number 1 team in the country. And I don't disagree with that. And they haven't played anybody yet.
I think Michigan, we actually tackled this on the Cover 3 podcast. A Michigan fan said, Michigan has gotten a lot of heat for its strength of schedule. Why hasn't Ohio State?
Right.
And our response was, that's fair. It's 100% fair.
It is fair.
It's just that Michigan came into the season knowing that it was going to be playing 3 of the 10 worst teams at the FBS level.
Right.
Like when you go up against Colorado State, Hawaii, and UConn, like you are asking to be able to see if your 4th quarterback can throw 10 times in a game. Like you are just setting up the most depth building,
right? Just
routine going through the motion scrimmages. And look, it allowed Jim Harbaugh to take his quarterback competition into the season. Mm-hmm. Eventually, J.J. McCarthy does end up winning that job, even though I think they're a much better running team than anything they do at the quarterback position right now. And Ohio State coming into the season thought it had a real challenge with Notre Dame coming to town. It is not proven to be that, but Ohio State and Michigan, both of them look excellent. Neither of them has a great strength of schedule argument. I think that a loss for either one of them would endanger their college football playoff hopes in the same way that a loss for the Clemson Tigers would endanger Clemson's college football playoff hopes.
Yeah, well, I think there's a practical reason why a loss for either Ohio State or Michigan, which would likely come against the other, would endanger their playoff chances, is because they would lose the division and they wouldn't win the Big Ten championship.